Moving into my first apartment after university was an exciting milestone. To celebrate this new chapter, I decided to throw a party and invited all my friends from university, along with some of their friends. The apartment was buzzing with energy, laughter, loud music, and just a really great atmosphere. Amidst the chaos of the party, a friend pointed out a stranger. I looked around trying to place him, but no one seemed to know who he was. What caught our attention was his peculiar behaviour. He wasn't engaged in any conversations, yet he was constantly hovering near groups of people, staring at them with an odd expression on his face. It was weird. Unable to ignore the discomfort he caused, I approached one of my friends and asked if they could politely ask him to leave. Surprisingly, he complied without protest, leaving us to enjoy the rest of the night. We dismissed the incident as a minor disturbance, eager to continue the party. As the night went on, the party eventually came to an end. Most of the guests bid their farewells and headed home, leaving only my best friend who had kindly volunteered to stay and help with the post-party cleanup. Exhausted, we retired to my room, ready to crash out. Just as I was beginning to drift off to sleep, a muffled thudding noise disturbed the silence. It was coming from the second bedroom down the hall. Being in a new apartment, every sound was unfamiliar, but this repetitive thudding was different, like someone relentlessly banging on a door. A sense of dread washed over me, mingled with confusion. Curiosity got the better of us, and my best friend and I decided to investigate the source of the noise. We cautiously opened the bedroom door, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The second bedroom door was ajar, darkness enveloping the room beyond. As we approached, the sound grew louder, originating from a faint outline of a person standing about 10 feet away, with his face pressed up against the far wall. With a surge of adrenaline, we turned on the lights and shouted, "What the F are you doing here?" But the figure remained motionless. The thudding noise we had heard was the sound of him repeatedly banging his head against the wall. Even without seeing his face, we recognized his clothes and posture. It was the same guy from the party. Terrified, my friend grabbed my arm, and we hastily retreated to the safety of my bedroom, locking the door behind us. Trembling, we dialed the emergency services, summoning the police for help. The thudding abruptly ceased, leaving an eerie silence that reverberated throughout the apartment. When the police arrived, we guided them to the second bedroom, but there was no one there. The room stood empty, except for signs of a forced entry through the window. It was a chilling revelation. The intruder had escaped into the night, leaving only traces of his nefarious intentions behind. Weeks passed, and we heard nothing more about the incident. It seemed as though the darkness that had invaded our apartment had dispersed, leaving us to move forward, cautiously grateful for our safety. Then one day, I received an unexpected call from the police. They requested my presence at the station to identify a potential offender from a lineup. Arriving at the station, I nervously observed the lineup of individuals, praying that the man responsible for our harrowing experience would be among them. As my gaze scanned the room, my heart sank. There he stood, unmistakable with his eerie expression, as if he had no regard for the gravity of his actions. The police informed me that he had been caught attempting to break into an apartment, armed with a knife and cable ties. They charged him with breaking and entering, harassment from the night of my party, and other related offences. It wasn't the best start to a new apartment, but the experience taught me to be more vigilant, and I'm strong enough to move forward. I'm just glad I trusted my gut that night, and for having my friend with me. The night started like any other house party we'd thrown in our college apartment. Every room was filled with laughing and general stupidity. The sound of clinking cups and bottles and the thumping bass of the music seeped through the walls, declaring to the neighbourhood that we were in full swing. My closest friends and I were relishing the chance to unwind after a grueling semester. The stress of exams, essays, and deadlines seemed light years away, as we danced around and shouted along to our favourite tunes. In the midst of the revelry, my friend Jason received a text. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, his face showing no emotion. He made his way towards the front door, his phone screen casting a bluish glow on his face. We thought little of it. It wasn't unusual for someone to step out to take a call or to respond to an urgent message, so we continued to revel in the night. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. but there was no sign of Jason returning. I checked my phone for messages, wondering if he'd sent an update, but there was nothing. Sarah was his girlfriend and we hadn't seen her at the party. Maybe it was a personal matter between them, I thought. As the clock ticked past midnight, tension started to creep into our group. We began to check our phones for messages from Jason or anyone else who might have heard from him, and still nothing. By this point, the party had lost its luster. Laughter had turned into hushed conversations and anxious glances towards the door. Finally, around 1:30 a.m, we decided to take action. Something wasn't right, and we needed to find Jason. We ventured out onto the dimly lit porch, where the chilly night air only added to the goosebumps. I sent him a text, urging him to let us know where he was. No response. Minutes felt like hours as we scanned the surrounding area. It was a quiet neighbourhood, and there was no sign of him. We called his phone repeatedly, hoping for a familiar ringtone in the distance. Nothing but the night's still silence. I called his girlfriend Sarah. She said she hadn't spoken to him since before he left for the party, and now she was starting to panic too. She called the police, and we went through our contacts calling anyone vaguely connected to Jason, but nobody was able to help. The night that had started with so much promise had taken a sinister turn, and we were left with a growing sense of dread. The distant wail of sirens finally shattered the stillness of the night. The flashing lights of a police car pulled up to our apartment complex. We rushed to the offices, explaining the situation frantically. The police began an investigation immediately. They questioned all of us, trying to piece together the events leading up to Jason's disappearance. We told them about the mysterious text message he'd received, his sudden exit, and the fact that he hadn't returned. The hours turned into a long, agonizing night as the police searched the vicinity and questioned neighbours. There were no leads, no clues, and no trace of Jason. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and Jason's disappearance remained a baffling mystery. The police conducted an exhaustive search, interviewed countless individuals, and scoured surveillance footage from nearby businesses, but there were just no leads. As the months passed, the initial shock and fear gave way to a profound sadness. The once vibrant apartment had become a place of sorrow and unanswered questions, and it just felt horrible to be there. It's been nearly 2 years now. The uncertainty and the lack of closure weigh heavily on all of us. We all miss him so much, and have no way to explain where our friend went that night. My excitement over moving into my new house had barely simmered when I decided it was time to throw a housewarming party. Nestled in a peaceful neighbourhood, my 2-bedroom haven was finally ready to host friends and acquaintances for a night of celebration. As the evening unfolded, music pulsed in the background, conversations became louder and more animated, with laughter blending the whole racket together. It was a snapshot of those rare moments when life felt utterly perfect. As the party went on, a couple of my more spirited friends began to engage in the inevitable wrestling and play fighting in the living room. At first, it was all part of the fun, with bursts of laughter and light-hearted taunts. However, the joyous revelry came to an abrupt end with a resounding crash that shattered the merriment. A collective pause and cringe amongst the guests focused everyone's attention to the centre of the living room. A gaping hole in the plasterboard, about the size and shape of my friend's back, was a new addition to the room. Initially, anger surged within me at the damage inflicted upon my pristine new home, but that anger quickly transformed into curiosity as I peered closer at the unexpected cavity. The space behind the plaster seemed improbably large. My rage was eclipsed by an insatiable desire to investigate further, and so, armed with a flashlight, I peered deeper into the mysterious void. As the beam of light penetrated the hidden chamber, disbelief washed over me. Concealed within the very walls of my new home lay an entire room. 2 of my friends, Mike and Dave, navigated their way through the damaged wall into the hidden room, which was far from empty. Instead, it contained a mattress, covered in well-worn blankets and a haphazard pile of clothing, as well as scattered empty food wrappers that all looked relatively fresh. The walls of the room had strange markings and writing in another language, and in one corner, a small bowl held what looked like chicken bones. As we were looking around in utter disbelief, I noticed that nobody had said a word for what seemed like ages, and the noise of the party had reduced to a murmur. Who had been living in this space, and when? I'd been living here for at least 2 weeks. Had I had an unknown guest that whole time? The cryptic markings and the creepy bowl of bones seemed secondary, but still concerning nonetheless. Our exploration took an unexpected turn when we discovered a small entrance leading to a crawl space. This concealed passage, as we soon realised, connected the basement and the storm shelter entrance. That must have been where whoever had been living in there was able to get access to and from outside. We squeezed through the crawl space and noticed that the storm shelter door was slightly ajar, with a small piece of wood wedged underneath one of the heavy doors. With unease gnawing at us, I closed and bolted the shelter entrance, and we retreated from the basement, deciding it was best to contact my landlord the next day with the unanswered questions, and of course to explain the damage to the wall. My landlord was totally understanding about the damage, and the repairs were inexpensive. However, she had no idea at all about the resulting discovery, and was as surprised as I had been when she came round to inspect the next day. We had the entrance to the basement secured, sealed off the crawl space, and had the plasterboard repaired, but we were never able to solve the mystery of the hidden room and its bizarre contents. One fact was for certain: it was a housewarming party that we will remember for a long time, but maybe not for the intended reason.